This world is not complete. It needs organizers and adventurers to order and explore it. It needs you.
Okay. Oh, okay, sorry. Quiet. Shut up.
Subtract experience.
Alright.
Okay, so we're gonna have to pick your spells 15, and then see if you know. Actually, you get minimum number of spells per level. You're third level, so you get 24 spells.
What's that?
One of them is good luck.
Right.
I don't know which one.
Wait till I suggest. I've been a wizard and I've been a fighting man.
Okay.
And I enjoy wizard. When I was a wizard, I enjoyed that. But I
Can't roll a one.
That is so cool. And how long ago?
Like, my dad wouldn't let me play video games. He wouldn't let me read comic books. He let me do girly things. So I hadn't even really, I mean, you kind of hear about it. You hear stories from so-and-so's cousin plays it. But I'd never really experienced it until I started dating this guy who had played it.
Well, I think this particular friend of mine had already been interested in D&D, and he just wanted to sort of get the rest of the group involved in it. So we got involved through him. It was his idea for a campaign. We sort of all joined in.
And they'd come over to the house. We'd play King Oil, Monopoly, you know, anything to play. And I had gone over to Toys R Us. And I was looking for a game, and this real dorky kid, I swear, I mean, if you saw him, you would never buy anything from him. He said, "You ever play Dungeons and Dragons?" I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah, it's a fantasy role-playing game."
I guess it was just a group of friends I was with in probably 7th or 8th grade when I was in junior high school, and one of my friends, I still remember the day when he brought in this, I think it was the Dungeon Master's Guide, and they said, "Well, we're playing this new game, and here's the rule book." I flipped through it and I'm like, "Are you nuts? This is the rule book?" I couldn't believe it. I'm used to playing like Yahtzee or poker, where the rules would fit on a small index card. And so I started attending these sessions, not really knowing what the game was about, because I didn't have any of the books. I didn't have any background on what role playing is about.
Dungeons and Dragons is the unlikely descendant of European warfare. In the late 18th century, the Prussian military developed a system for simulating battlefield scenarios which could be used to train young officers in military tactics. This was known as Kriegspiel, or war game. Markers on a tabletop map indicated troop positions, and dice were used to determine the outcome of the random elements of combat. A century later, British writer H.G. Wells, best known for classic science fiction stories like The Invisible Man and The Time Machine, introduced military wargaming to a wider audience by publishing a simplified version of the rules for use with toy soldiers. He called it Little Wars. The hobby eventually spread around the world, with various clubs publishing endless variations on the rules for simulating the combat of any era in the history of warfare. One such club was the Castles and Crusades Society in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, where two medieval-era wargamers, David Arneson and Gary Gygax, began to take their hobby in new directions. Rather than play the parts of generals commanding their troops, they specialized in playing the roles of individuals on the battlefield. And rather than confine themselves to the limits of historical accuracy, they expanded the milieu to include all the myth and magic of fantasy literature. They published out of Gygax's basement under the company name TSR and called the new game Dungeons and Dragons.
nephew to Corinne, king of Undermountain, and I am the son of Gordon, high priest of Undermountain, who are all now lying in their graves, who were drowned by the necromancer fiend.
You hear some gas from the other men at arms.
He wields now the Dagim, an artifact made of pure diamond, stolen from the depths of Undermountain.
People will take on a persona of sort of an alter ego, which they call a character. Some people will basically just play themselves, like, you know, I'm Bob, I just play myself as if I were in this foreign world, you know, doing whatever I would do. And some people will take on an entire different personality.
What is your name?
I am Morgandy. I'm the god.
You're a god?
Guy.
Oh,
You know, you might have somebody who's really a person who's really outgoing and extroverted, and they might choose to play a really shy, sheltered person. So some of that, you know, is sort of exploring other personalities and ways of interacting with people.
I have seen the end of the world, men slaughtered to the last number. I had to flee the most courageous of monsters. I seek to battle them and defeat them.
This is a good question.
I believe
You and I have similar
the end of the earth is upon us. And one day this will all be dust.
I like to play the aggressive character, you know, because life is about being safe. You know, so when I get into a fantasy role, I want to be able to push the limits. I mean, that's the whole point behind these characters, is to be able to do things that you would not conceive of or even, you know, consider doing in your normal everyday life.
I always considered myself kind of a wacko, so a misfit of society. So I relate to the half-orcs, you know. So I enjoy being a half-orc, you know, because when you play the game, you like to pretend, you know, you fall into this character. So for some reason, you know, some people like to be elves, some people want to be bards.
Misfit.
Oh, I don't know. Oh yeah, and then there's this little creature over here. What describe yourself? What do you look like to the viewers?
Well, I'm like 3 feet, a little taller. I'd like to be a part of this community because I'm rather lonely.
If we got too into the characters, then we would, you know, lose sight of the actual game, and, like, you know, there are rules to this game and everything. But playing the character is the part that makes it fun.
The ones that really go off the wall and really get into a character, that's scary. We had a guy named Steve that played in our game. Nicest guy you'd ever want to meet, but when he sat down to play, he played an elf and believed he was that elf.
You can really piss off people, you know, but them getting pissed off is probably them getting mostly pissed off in character. You know, that's going to be their reaction to you. And then, you know, you'll go out, whatever, and have a beer or whatever. But I've seen people get upset. There's some people who are less mentally stable than others that play the game. So, and I've seen some guy get tackled before. I've seen I once had a guy who just took everything on the table and just completely threw everything off the table, picked up the table and threw it, then went over to the dungeon master, picked him up and threw him off of his chair. And so yeah, he was kicked out of the game after that. But what's funny is he was kicked out and he came back 6 months later and we let him in.
One player must serve as the dungeon master, the shaper of the fantasy world in which all the action will take place. The dungeon master, or DM, will act the parts of everyone else and will present to you a variety of new characters to talk with, adventure with, and often fight with.
I think we should all refer to each other by character name and There should be no talking amongst yourselves other than in character talking. If you have to say anything else to the referee over here, you can speak to me, but you should be very careful about what you say to one another. And any actions that you state that you're going to do will literally happen to your character, so try to be careful about it.
Role-playing games aren't really competitive, and there's no real winner or loser. You and your friends are trying to work together towards a common goal, so it's usually more cooperative. And even the DM is not really your enemy. He's really sort of a referee trying to sort of guide you along the way and make things happen.
You are in the town of Freehold. You have been born there. Sir Ram, you've also been born there. Plus you characters happen to be the most respected ones in the town in terms of fierceness and strength. And seems that word gets around, you know, in the wilderness, you know, that this every 3 months or so, the caravan, you trade with this other town, Mir. And so you've got a shipment of giant spider silk and a dozen barrels of Freehold's finest porter ale that you have to guard on this caravan through the forest and across the plains.
There's a book called The Dungeon Master's Guide, which has a lot of guidelines as far as how to keep a story going, what to do when your players aren't cooperating with you, how to create a world and flesh it out so it's interesting for the players, how to deal with players doing unexpected things, that sort of stuff. But a lot of it you just sort of have to learn by doing. You know, you can read the book backwards and forwards, and until you actually sit down and run a table of players, it's really not the same. You really sort of need that hands-on experience to know what to do.
I mean, you interact with the players though, so the better the players are, the more you can feed on that energy and become better in the storyline and you know, make things more realistic. And that's what, I mean, that's what a good DM should do.
To me, the DM or the GM, whatever you want to call him, his job is to get to you, is to make you want to do something. And you can go off your own, and that was the one thing they liked about my game. They could go off in a totally different direction, but I always steered them back to where I wanted them. And it was, and they didn't know it was happening. They didn't know it was being done to them.
You finally emerge from the forest and you can see open plains, and now you can see a little bit of the moonlight is shining into the open plains, and from the darkness that you've been in, on the canopy of these trees, it suddenly looks somewhat much brighter to you. Even you can see a little bit, you know, and you can see the twinkling stars. But what you immediately all notice is when you come out into this opening, there's this dock, and where the raft should be, you see the raft is there, but there are bodies strewn all over the place. Looks like...
Last morning, I ride up. The necromancer was here. I ride up on my horse and I investigate.
Something from the brush in front of you seems to have been disturbed by all this noise you're making. Something comes rushing out towards you. You see a bunch of fur and a bunch of tusks. It looks like what looks to be a wild boar.
When do I get there?
You guys are on your way over there. You can fire and you can attack. And what are you doing? Are you still studying?
I guess I haven't even, I've got wax in my ears, so I...
Roll again! Into the
first roll of the game, a perfect hit!
And it kind of squeals. It says, like, convulses a couple times and falls over and kind of convulses a couple more times. And he sinks his axe. Blood spurts out, and you see now those little speckles of blood.
There is a lot of tactics in D&D where position is important, and some of that actually does carry over from wargaming. D&D originally started out as a way to codify a set of rules for wargaming with individual pieces. This is, you know, way back 30 years ago when the game first started, and then it evolved into a more of a role-playing, story-based type of game.
You know, you roll this character and you attribute your numbers that you roll to how you're going to be in combat. So yeah, I think that does force you to be thinking about it a lot more. But it also depends on who you're playing with. I think, you know, the people I play with, we're storytellers. So we want a big story. We want interesting plot twists. Battle, you know, it happens when we have to do it.
That's the beauty of this game. You see, everybody plays it different. Every group plays it differently. You know, depending on the group of people involved, it's a totally different game. Some are more combat oriented, you know, more precise, like how do you call it? I don't know, strategic, right? Some are more strategically oriented. Others are more role-playing oriented. Right? Some people might sit around and talk for 6 hours and not do anything in the game.
What, gutting a boar?
Complete. I've gutted the boar, I've skinned it, I've quartered it, and I've divvied it up amongst the men of arms to carry. And now we're back on the way. I wiped myself up on a bush.
Ultimately, despite the fact that this is a game system created by someone else, the game's viability rests principally with the referee. The dungeon master must design and map out the dungeon, town, and world maps. He or she must populate the whole world, create its history, and even devise some rationale for what transpires.
Well, you spend more time designing things than actually playing. I mean, you spend hours and years drawing maps and creating things, and you know, fortunately, I managed to figure out a way to make a living out of it. But you know, all through college, I think I spent more time designing dungeons than I did doing homework and all that other stuff.
So this is AD&D. This is back when I was like 15 years old. This is like probably 20 years ago, okay? Crypts and Tombs of the Emerald Isle. These are all the different dungeons, and here I would draw out all the little rooms. Once again, no one would ever see this except me. So I'd spend hours just coloring these things in just to amuse myself. I had a lot of fantasy as a kid, you know? See? We had like all the little stones in the rooms, and you know, my mother would come in and say, "What the hell are you doing? Will you go outside and do something? You know, what are you doing sitting at that desk all day? You know?" So here you go. Here's a red dragon. You see the red dragon? There's treasure everywhere, right? Here you have 3 jars of Keokutum's ointment that cures your wounds and all that stuff.
So has all this stuff been adventured in? Have you taken players through this stuff or no?
Yeah, most of them. I think there may be a couple in here that they never even got to because they ended up like killing each other. They would always end up killing each other, you know? I don't know why. It'd be like the armory. See here, I have a little armory shop. It's a weapon store. All the weapons they can buy. Here, this is the owner, Bross. He used to be fat, but I crossed that out and now he's thin, right? Thin, bearded, retired adventurer. Half-melted face from Dragon's Fire. So I would make these little notes to myself, so how I would describe him to people, you know? Somebody else is doing the same stuff I'm doing here. They've got their books in their closet somewhere. You know, who knows what kinds of drawings they're doing.
I used to draw out my own graph paper on 18 by 24 inch paper, which is nuts, you know, 1/4 inch graph paper, and then just fill them, you know, from corner to corner with corridors and rooms, and even adding sheets of paper on top of each other to make multiple layers to the dungeon.
So you got a ranger, a paladin, a magic user. So these are the people who kind of work. This is from 82 to 83. When I would play with one of my friends, Vincent. So there's kind of 3 of us who played, Kyle, Vincent, and myself. And these are some of the characters. Let's see. And they'd get married off. You know, they'd find wives and get married. So we'd make up the wife character sheets. There's I know. This is 81, and this is actually one of the, I think the second group of characters we had. So I kind of keep, I used to keep all these things, and then since they were getting married, we started creating dominant and recessive gene structures. So when you'd have children, then you kind of like roll 50-50 percentile to see what gene you'd get for the strength number, and then from there, then that's who they would play with afterward. They'd play with their.
In my map, you see here we have the Canyon of the Gods. Now I have that drawn out somewhere. I can't find it, but here there's waterfalls. Here there's a city. You have to get up there, and there's a lot of like flying dragons around and stuff. And if you get really powerful, you could maybe tame a dragon, and that's the best way to fly around in the canyons. Here, Cobbletown. And here's another drawing I did. You see all the time I spent? Like this is like when I was in college, I love these old maps, like Italian maps and stuff. So I was copying this kind of design. Here's a castle, for instance. No one would actually see this map. I would just explain to people, okay, you go down a long corridor and then you get into round room and you see barrels and sacks of flowers in the middle. There's a spiral staircase going down. I do all these illustrations to get me excited. This is all for me, to get me excited. So I'm looking at the map, all excited about the map, and that comes out hopefully in the game. Because instead of writing text to myself, I do little illustrations so that I can tell people, oh yeah, in this room there's a fountain with this, and I'm looking at the map, I'm looking physically at the drawings, so I'm describing the drawing to them, but they are just imagining it in their head. So that's how I would play. Some people would make notes, but I'm not much of a text person.
I'd basically just have a book turn it into a little book of contents and descriptions for all the different kind of maps that I would make here. And so for each section, I would just go into describing what's in each encounter or each room. Let's see. Yeah. The cleric's name was Telemina. The temple was established in 2403 of the Fourth Age. Telemina left mummies, zombies, and skeletons to guard the temple. He animated and turned them into the undead. The only way into the chamber is through the tunnel D, which leads to P. So there's the tunnel D, which probably goes... Where is P?
For me, that's half the fun, is creating the map. That's like playing. Even when no one's around, you're drawing it, you're creating it, you're imagining it, you're fantasizing, you're being the architect of your world. You're creating all this stuff, and you're creating the ultimate world, your dream world, in your fantasy kind of world. You're creating it, and then people come in to your world and they bring it to life, and events happen that you never would have imagined were happening. So that's what's really great about it. Is imagine if you're an author, you create a book, and you invite some people over, and the characters in the book come to life and go on to courses of adventure that you never would have imagined. It's the most amazing thing, because you don't know what's going to happen in the game. It depends on what happens that night, I mean, you could have a city that burns down. You could create, years building a city and then it burns down in the game, I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. Or someone builds a new city. Someone wants to build a castle. One city goes to war with another. I mean, all kinds of things can happen during the course of the game. Your world comes to life. So, it could be very consuming,
I just came back from a convention on Memorial Day weekend in Ohio, and I'm going down to Virginia in a couple of weeks to play at a convention there. Part of it is that I'm involved in the Live and Greyhawk campaign, and there are a lot of conventions that offer adventures only available there. Like, I go to Ohio, I play adventures that are only available in Ohio. I can't play them in New York.
He's asking us where we come from. We come from the Live Greyhawk. Dangerous here. Big move.
Basically, all the players in Live and Greyhawk play characters in the same setting, and it's divided into regions. Every part of the country represents a different area of the setting. So for example, if you play in New York, you're playing in Q-Land, which is a fairly prosperous, large, well-organized kingdom. If you go down to DC, you're playing in the Duchy of Jeff, which is playing a country that's been overrun by giants, and they're fighting to reclaim their land from the enemy. And you can take the same character and play in either one.
It looks up at him and it's going, oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for getting me. You are my savior.
Plus you get to play with people from all over the world. So you definitely get the feel of there's this huge, vast world of things going on. Whereas in a home campaign, it's pretty much just confined to you, what's going on around you, and the rest of the world tends not to be very well developed.
Of any type, there's an annual event you should know about. The event is Gen Con, America's premier convention and trade show. Celebrity guests, prizes, and trophies. It all adds up to 4 days of gaming you won't want to.
After I got out of the Army, I got a job there as a civilian, and I was doing helicopters and tanks and soldiers and everything. And this guy, we hired a new guy, and he was playing this new game called Dungeons and Dragons, right? So he talked us into playing. I said, wow, that's a neat game, man. I've never seen a game like that, a role-playing game. And so he sent some of my samples into them to get work, maybe, because I thought I would. I said, you know, the art was pretty primitive looking, and I thought maybe they want that look. And I found out later that they didn't know what they were doing. They was just getting an artist down the street or somebody's uncle to do covers. You know, they didn't know, because they were young and it was selling so fast. They didn't know what to do. And it was a great time. We all got along. We all communicated. When the writers write a book, they would talk to us, you know, walk across the hall and discuss what the cover would look like for Dragonlance, all that stuff. We worked hand in hand with the writers.
Dragonlance was the first novel that had ever been written to a game. I was working at TSR at the time with Margaret Weiss. She was a story editor and I was a game designer. I expected to be a game designer forever, actually. But we had started this project called Dragonlance, and it came out with a series of novels. We're supposed to have a series of novels. And one day Margaret came to me and said, we're the ones who understand this story. It's our story. These are our characters. We need to be the ones to write it.
But really, developing novels off game sessions usually doesn't work, because if you're doing a plot line for a game, it tends to go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Whereas the plot line for a novel goes up, steadily rising action to the climax, then falling action. You don't get that in a game. So if you're going to do a novel based on a game, you can use the characters, you can use your world, but don't depend on, you know, come up with your own plot.
The books themselves were seen as an add-on to the role-playing product. And so the initial issue was how great of a role-playing game could we make, and oh yeah, we're going to do some novels. The interesting thing is that I think the company has made far more money with the novels now than they ever made off of the game.
Magic missile in that sucker. Go ahead, magic missile this way too.
Can I simply shoot it? So will that do no good anyway?
13 points of magic missile.
Playing the game in college, I noticed that everyone kind of wanted to have their own unique, you know, dice, their own unique style. And because of that individualism, I think it spills over into the accessories that they use. They like to have something that no one else has. They like that unique aspect. And so we've sort of touched upon that, coming up with real, you know, exotic designs and shapes and colors. We make a whole dice range out of semi-precious stones. To have a set of stone dice that were, you know, mined from the earth and cut into dice is a pretty unique set. People will purchase dice for different situations in a game. If they're trying to roll to save themselves from a cataclysmic event, they have certain dice. If they're rolling to cause damage, they have certain dice. If a dice rolls too unlucky, people throw them away. It's a continually renewable product we have, because people will actually devise all sorts of ways to destroy unlucky dice. Melting them in microwaves, reducing them to bubble, bubbling heap of slag. I've heard of people grinding them. I've heard of people throwing them, sinking them in water, burying them. I've heard of people burying them. Some people get pretty creative.
No. He's gotta get. I don't want him to die.
No, we need a red one for that though. Because he's
red goblin one. Oh.
When I first started playing, we didn't use any miniatures. It was all imagined in your head. The miniatures started to come into play because if you had like a big battle, let's say there's 6 of you playing, you have 6 people, you come into some cavern in the game, and maybe there's 50 kobolds, and you're like, well, hell, I don't know where I'm standing. You can't imagine it, and you're all imagining something different. So the dungeon master would have to say, okay, look, let's put your pieces, you'd have to where you represent it, kind of like chess.
But that makes me feel like I'm playing a board game. I go with it because I can see how it helps them out, and it does help us out, kind of in envisioning this. But in the same sense, we can't picture the walls. We can't picture the enemy because we have this cardboard cutouts in front of us.
No, it helps see what your character looks like. It helps movement. If I say 50 orcs and goblins are walking across this field on my table, I've got 50 orcs and goblins coming at you.
I was on the art end rather than on the gaming end. Now we'd had friends who'd been into gaming. My children are into it big time now, but of course I'm into the miniatures now. But I mostly do not get the joy of playing with the things I create. I have to watch other people paint them and play with them. Now this is a figure for Reaper Miniatures. It was designed by their staff artist, Tim Collier. And hopefully we will be able to get all that on there without it looking too busy, because this little girl, this one is the armature for her. Okay, I'm going to start working on her here. Okay, I need to have you lay that down so I can look at it. Okay. This is two-part epoxy putty made by Polymeric Systems, Inc. And basically it's fairly sticky stuff. You keep it from sticking your tools in your fingers when you need to by moistening it. You can use water or spit, as some of us do. I know that sounds gross, but we do because it's handy. I'm using a number 11 X-Acto blade that's been dulled down. This one's also been dropped a lot, so it's not very long. But as you see, I lick it, so the only thing that's sharp here is the point, and that's so we can do details like eyeballs and lips and that sort of thing. Oh, we're working it here. Oftentimes I get people saying, oh, if I just had this kind of figure, my character would be perfect. And it is really fun when you can talk somebody into hiring you to do that kind of figure, so that person can have their character.
And I used to go down to the mall and buy the miniatures, and there was a guy that was near the store where I used to buy the stuff, and he'd say, you could watch, but don't ask any questions.
All right, so
Good. I mean, I was really underfinanced. But the parents loved me because the kids could come and game in the store. They learned how to paint in the store, and it was big on like school. Like I told the kids, if they got A's and B's, they got 10% off. And the kids worked real hard. I mean, the parents got to the point where they'd call up and say, do me a favor, kill my son off because he's not doing good in school. And the kid would die and he couldn't come back.
Just as Dungeons and Dragons was beginning to take hold on popular culture, it was suddenly and unexpectedly catapulted into the headlines by an incident that has coloured popular perception of the game ever since. In 1979, James Dallas Egbert III, known as Dallas, went missing from the campus of Michigan State University, where he was a 16-year-old freshman. Dallas was a child prodigy and so-called computer whiz kid who graduated from high school when he was only 12. When he disappeared, his family enlisted the services of one William Deere, a media-savvy private investigator who later wrote a book on the case called The Dungeon Master. Deere learned that some of the students, Dallas included, were playing a real-life version of D&D in the dark and steamy tunnels under the university campus. He also found, among young Egbert's possessions, a corkboard in which pushpins were arranged in a curious pattern. It was not long before the detective shared his suspicions with the press. The pushpins, he surmised, corresponded to a map of the underground labyrinth, and Dallas Egbert probably met his end in a game of Dungeons and Dragons gone too far. The incident became the stuff of urban legend. It even inspired a movie called Mazes and Monsters, starring a young Tom Hanks. Reaction went to extremes. Concerned parents worried that D&D might not be just a game, but some kind of cult. And fundamentalist Christians were convinced that it was nothing but a tool for recruiting converts to devil worship. Such controversy, of course, only served to make the game more popular. The irony of the situation was lost on Dallas Egbert. The truth about his story is as mundane as it is tragic. Dallas had simply run away and turned up on his own accord after his disappearance became national news. It was true he had played D&D, but he also struggled with drug addiction and severe emotional problems. All the publicity didn't help. He took his own life with a pistol at the age of 17.
So this is actually a more psychological picture that I drew when I was having a bad day, and I felt a little split personality with this one. This is a dragon I drew one day. He's very angry. He's very fiery, and I think when I do draw him, he'll be red. And the next picture is something I'm working on. It's kind of inspired by The Tempest, because I've got this creature coming out of the tree, which the creature Ariel in Shakespeare's The Tempest is imprisoned in a tree. So it might be part of that, and I think it's more of a theme about temptation, and because you've got this demon who's obviously very demonic looking, touching a girl on the head.
A lot of people, I would say, but now these were adults. I got inside your head, and I'd screw with your head, and they'd get pissed at me. They really would. And I said, hey, I'm the DM. This is what a DM does, you know. I'm impartial. I could care less whether you live or die. I had a girl where she played a paladin, and everybody had to write a history about their characters. So she decided that her sister had left home, and she was out looking for her sister, and this was the whole quest and everything, and I threw them into a dungeon of their worst fears, and she walked into this room and all the family emblems and everything are turned upside down, you know. So who comes walking out from behind this altar but her sister, and her sister's a black paladin. Well, she wouldn't fight her sister, but she was too afraid to pray to the gods. So with this, the angel of death came and said, okay, you're not going to kill your sister, and you're not going to, you know, take faith in your gods. I'm taking you to hell. So instead of taking her, he took her soul. Took her to hell, and every demon in hell had its way with her. So now she comes back, and I said, you're filth, you're dirt. No one wants to look at you. And every once in a while I brought out the figure of the angel of death, and she freaked. At the end of the game, she turned and said, I can't do this anymore, Bob. She says, you got inside my head too deep. So I said, oh, yeah, but she said it was too much for her. And other people I did worse to. Worse.
Most people, when they're playing an evil character, will really get into it and sort of revel in all the bad things that the character will do. And sometimes it's a question of where to draw the line. I mean, it's, you know, going around in character, stealing people's stuff is not really that big a deal. But when you start getting into, like, you know, murder and pillaging and, you know, all sorts of destruction, that can get uncomfortable for some people, which is why evil characters can be difficult to deal with. But if you have a good set of players who are really into role-playing and know, you know, they know where not to step over the line, and they know that what they're doing is just a game and that they're not going to take it personally, it can be very liberating to have a character who will do anything at all to accomplish his goals, and he'll murder people, he'll, you know, summon great evil gods and, you know, destroy entire villages and so forth.
Your personality's left outside the game. You play a character personality, okay? If you're playing a thief and somebody gets something you want, you can talk to him and try to get it from him, or walk up behind him and slit his throat. I don't care, okay? But the kid whose throat he slits can't come back with another character and have revenge on him. It's a different character. It's a different person. You know, it's just a game.
I think if there is any fault in D&D, it is that it has no ethos, espouses no ethic. Everything that I have written has dealt with mythological concepts of good and evil, and I like to think touches on the same sorts of mythologies that are talked about in Joseph Campbell's work, for example. These are the kind of questions of good and evil and ethics that mythology has taught us down through the ages. So if there's any problem with Dungeons and Dragons per se, I think it's that as a game itself, it tries to espouse no ethic at all. When in fact it is such a great tool for teaching ethics, that a great opportunity is lost in that.
Girls are more sheltered, I think, by their parents than boys are in general. My personal experience was such as, like, you know, I was not allowed to be involved with any of that. All the girls I know who play it because their boyfriends, their husbands, somebody, you know, they were attached to plays it. They've never discovered it on their own. And part of that, you know, is also because girls are more self-conscious about, you know, their personality, how they are portrayed to their peers. And Dungeons and Dragons has this, you know, it's a picture of itself that only nerds play this game. This is a game for people who are socially unacceptable, for people who have, you know, no lives, geeks, chess club people, you know, things like that. And so girls are very hesitant to get involved with that because they think about, what are people going to think of me if I play this game? We don't think about something like that being fun until we get attached to somebody, we make friends with somebody who's very into this, and then, you know, we think, oh, well, I could try this too. I think I could have fun with this. And all the girls I know who play it have just as much fun as the guys, and even more so, you know, they get just as much into it.
Try to catch up a little. Okay. I'm following you. Okay.
There are some people who get way too into it. They'll go out with, you know, stage combat weapons that are not protected at all, and people get hurt. And I think that's becoming less and less a phenomenon. But the people I know will go out and they have, you know, these boffers, like pool noodles, you know, or sticks with lots of foam rubber, like the kind they use in therapy sessions, you know.
I was doing tabletop role-playing, and a friend of mine went ahead and convinced me to come down to an event actually at this camp to see it and see how I would like it. I was a little apprehensive at first, but I gave it a shot, fell in love with it after the first month.
I wouldn't go.
The next month, I went ahead and convinced her to come down, and that was it. We were players originally, and then we became the staff and even the owners at one point of an event. And we decided that with all the caring and concern that we have for the events, why don't we go ahead and make it broader, to the point where it's not just us storytelling, we're helping you build the characters not just from the tale, but from the guise of what you wear for the character.
Could you show me an example of a boffer weapon?
Well, a person came to me actually with the want and desire to have a weapon that looks like the sword from Vampire Hunter D. So this is actually still in construction, but by the time we're done, we're going to actually have glow-in-the-dark symbols crawling up the entire blade, so that not only during the day will the sword look beautiful, it'll even look more beautiful during night. And as you can see, we do like custom work, all the way from the hilt all the way to the tip of the sword. But this is another example. Somebody wants to have a handheld mace. Anything that a person wants, their desire, their vision, we have the ability.
Dwarven Forge is the company, and then our greatest product is Master Maze. We also make little accessories and things, like little tables and things. I mean, people would laugh, you know. I mean, I could never imagine that I finished school, let alone running a business. Basically, what I did was just create the pieces that I wanted to use to play with me and my friends. And now we got all kinds of crazy stuff, like cavernous passages. We even have a trap set. We have little mechanisms that have little spiky things fall down and swing at you and things like that. You know, secret revolving doors and portcullises. And now it's just like I've got like 80 different pieces. You know, I mean, it's just growing and growing. By you know, these sculptors like Tom Meyer and Sandra Garrity, and we were to collect these wonderful little miniatures and then paint them. After a while, it got to be like you'd have hundreds of these little figures that you painted, but there was nothing really good to put them in. So you'd get these nice three-dimensional figures painted up, and then you put them on graph paper. and take a magic marker and draw a cave and say, yeah, this is the cave you're in. And everyone say, oh yeah, okay, I can imagine this cave maybe, you know. And when I was a little kid, you know, I was a big fan of Lego and all this other things. So it was kind of a combination of all the ideas of things that I'd imagined and created, and said, you know, we'll make the ultimate piece. We'll put felt on the bottom, just like those fine chess pieces. You move them around, you know, they always have felt. That's like quality, you know.
Are you still working on this stuff? You're still building this world?
No, I stopped a long time ago. You know, that's it. You know, I haven't played in a long. I play other people's worlds because I have no time to do this. I'm building this stuff now to make a living. I have to make a living. When I was younger, I didn't have to make a living. So all this time to fantasize. Now I have to make a living. So at least I'm still somewhat doing something creative here. And so I'm still sort of having fun with this. But my dream is that maybe one day I'll retire and then I can get back to designing more worlds when I'm old and retired, you know? And I'll have, all I know is that I'm going to have so many dungeon pieces, I'll be able to build my world like no one else will be able to do. I mean, I have so much. I can build like rooms and rooms full of dungeons, you know? So that's the secret plan. That's what people don't understand, you see, is that this is all just so that when I retire, I can have all the dungeon pieces I need to play my game, see? I kill now! And so you hear something coming up the stairs from below pretty fast. Oh, and it sounds like whatever it is, it's pretty heavy because it's shaking the whole thing as it comes up.
How much time do we have?
Get away from the hole, now, dwarf. I'm gonna do a web spell.
Yeah, that's what informed me as an artist, was looking and being inspired by these games. I couldn't render like like Larry Elmore or Keith Parkinson or Clyde Caldwell, those guys I would see on Dragon, but at least I can make a map. And then I started drawing the characters involved in my stories and my friends' stories, and that obviously led to, in a way, to where I am now as a book cover and fantasy illustrator. And actually, I'm contributing now back to the field I love. That helped inspire me and make me who I am. And I realized, you know, some jobs you don't get all the money you want for them, but you want to do them, you should do them because of what they represent and who they also can influence. You know, who's going to see these covers and be inspired a little bit.
It's good to know that people think like that. That not everybody has, you know, not all the girls have to play with Barbies, and not all the guys have to play with toy cars. You know, sometimes you can make up your own fun and your own existence, which that really drew me, and I still go by that. It's a great way to live.
You know, to play a game and actively use your mind like the entire time, plus there are, you know, every single version that comes out, there are hundreds and hundreds of books, modules and things written and worlds and everything. So, you know, there's just so much information that you can like go out and read about and learn and try to like use it, incorporate it. And it's very, actually takes a great deal of stamina and it's time consuming. So it's not something I do very often anymore.
What I've learned from D&D as far as how it applies to real life, I think is mostly about how to interact with other people. I've met a lot of people playing D&D. I've, you know, traveled to conventions sometimes and meet people there that, you know, people from North Carolina or Ohio or Canada. And I guess a lot of what I've learned is sort of, you know, it may sound strange to say that I learned how to meet people, but within that setting.
It's like if you go to a play, you want to see the people there. You don't want to like watch a play online. You want to participate in it. You want to be there. You want to sit around and laugh together. I mean, it's a very sociable game.
I think more people should play it. I think more, I mean, get a good GM, a good DM, and I could sit here with 50 people and keep that 50 people enticed for hours, and have them going against each other and having a good time, and no one's going to get up from that table except to go to the bathroom, and even then they won't want to get up because they're not going to want to see what they're going to miss.
Dungeons and Dragons certainly has great entertainment value, but I think that it has, at the same time, a great opportunity to teach people who they should be, and to help people, especially young people, to work out problems in a positive problem-solving environment, and one that's a non-destructive environment.
The bastard.
There.
14.
You hit him with your, oh my god.
Your super strength.
He takes out from his back, right before this creature comes out, this 6 foot long two-handed sword that you're like, oh my god, and the gigantic guy of a man just whacks into him.
I love to roll my damage. I love rolling damage with my two-handed sword.
Smoke him.
Oh!
21 points.
21 points.
That was not a glancing wound.
He comes up with his, and he raises his club to hit you, and you go, "Hurrah!" You go right through his arm and into his side. His arm falls to the ground. He goes,
I could say that it can be taken to the level of art. If you're a really good dungeon master, I could say it's like being an actor in a play. If you want to call actors artists, you know, you could be that good, because some of these guys are really great. It takes a lot of storytelling skills, a lot of creativity. The group itself, if everybody is really taking it to another level, it could be a performance, you know. So, yeah, I could say that. Maybe I could fit in there somewhere. You know, these days they're calling just about anything.
Some characters will meet their doom. Some will eventually retire in favor of a new character. But playing well is a reward unto itself. And old characters are often remembered with fondness and pride as well.
My full and complete name is Ernest Gary Gygax, pronounced in Switzerland Gigax. It comes from the Greek word gigantus for giant, because family legend says that we're all descendants of Goliath. I get many fan letters saying how it's taught them, many things, improve, just the reading, interpersonal, communications. It's encouraged people to get into all sorts of, higher learning. And the main thing is, though, is wow, what great times I had. I'll never forget them.
Magical worlds have a strange way of differing. But while yours may not be quite the same as the one described here, it is ripe for adventure and plunder. Cleverness and imagination, along with a bit of luck, will always prevail, won't they?
You've signed everything, but I just want to thank you again for 15 years of the best times I've ever had.
Thank you very much. This is exactly what we were talking about. Did you just hear that?
Yes, I did.
15 years of good fun.
Yeah, I've been playing since 4th grade. It's a long time. So I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome.
It comes from the Greek word gigantus, for giant, because family legend says that we're all descendants of Goliath. So yes, after David cruelly slew our heroic ancestor, they ran away and ran to the islands in the Mediterranean, Crete and Eos, and then ended up in Thessalonica. 4 of the brothers, Gygax, I don't know what they're probably called, Gigantus then, got permission to sail through the Mediterranean out beyond the Pillars of Hercules. They sailed all the way around the coast of Europe and to northward and then eastward, shipwrecked in the Skagerrak. Managed to get back overland, and on the way back to Macedonia, they spotted the Swiss mountains and said, whoa, we'd like to live there. So the king of Macedonia gave them permission to move their families into the mountains. Then the story goes that as they were into the mountains, they said, oh, look, there's even nicer land over here to the west. And they started to move down, but lots of soldiers in red were coming and conquering the land, so they moved back. And so they're into the Bern, what's now Canton Bern. So the family hit Switzerland, according to family legend, around the time of Julius Caesar.
Well, his adventures in the blood.
That's right. My next door neighbors were the Rashes. They lived very close to the house in Lake Geneva. And John Rash was a boy my age, a few months younger. And his older brother Jim was 7 years older than John and I. And Jim got rheumatic fever and had to be in bed, and so he got bored. And of course, John and I and Don Kay would be coming over and to play, cops and robbers or whatever. And he said, no, that isn't the way to do it. Here, what you need to do is, what's your name? And so he had us fill out. He had printed up little ID cards, and we had old wallets and hats. We had some, if we were playing private detectives particularly, old fedoras to wear, and model guns and holsters, and there was money. And I never forget the money, because it was huge stacks of money. It looked quite good, but it said worth $1 at the turkey auction sometime in 1938 it was, or in the 30s, not 38. But he had written over it with India ink, so that there were $1 bills, 1s, 2s, 5s, 10s, all the way up to $50,000 bills. And of course, costume jewelry, so that if we were robbers, you'd get the money, and if otherwise we get paid when we had to do things like it. If we were going to go to the saloon, you'd have to buy your drink, or you're buying dinner, and you'd get paid. We would play crime photographers sometimes with cameras. I remember I got in big trouble because I sold the same photograph to 2 newspapers. And they said, so he was pretty cruel. If you did something and got thrown in jail, or you got shot and killed, you would go home. Say, so we were very careful. It was no bang. You thought before you drew your weapon or did something silly. Well, it was all pretty silly, really. We call it, realistic gaming.
That's great.
It was just so much fun.
Down the road then?
Oh, that was, I really forgot about it until after role playing, and somebody said, well, where did the idea come from? And I got to thinking about it, and I said, well, Jim Rash was probably, because he was the first game master that I know of.